Welcome back. For those of you that are new, my name is Will. For those of you who have been with me from the beginning, it's nice to see you. Thank you for joining. First things first, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, I have a poodle in my jacket. The only way to keep him from barking. That being said, quick recap as to what it is we've been talking about. In our last video, we talked about leveling and effects chains, because as you modify a waveform, it will need to be re-leveled before it's mixed. Prior to that, we talked about normalizing, which is taking the raw waveform and setting all of them to the same volume so that you can mix them. And then prior to that, we just talked about some basic best practices for recording on the iPad. In this video, we get into mixing, which is when our finished product will start to take form. Part of mixing will also be arranging, and an optional step in the mixing process will be automating. So we will talk about that today as well, and how to do it in both GarageBand and Logic Pro. So Logic Pro, general rule for mixing is you turn your volume down so that all of your frequencies can be heard. Logic Pro has a stereo out, which controls the volume of the actual song, but then it also has a master out, which only controls the volume of your headphones. Depending on what kind of interface you're using, your interface might have its own volume. Mine does. So for now, I'm not going to touch the master volume, and I'm going to turn my volume down on my actual interface. And then the first thing we're going to do, if you remember the last video, I muted the solo for the song, so the actual melody. We're going to work with that first. So instead of muting it, now we're going to turn it back on and then solo it. And what I do is I do one channel for the clean tone, and then I bus that to where I want to put my mic emulator. So right now, channel 1 is my lead guitar, and then aux 6 will be the effects for it. And then if you double click on the aux send here, it puts it at 0. If you need more, you still have some headroom, so I can turn it up to 6, I can turn it down, but for now I just keep it at 0 and use the sliders on the aux channel itself. So let's get started. I'm gonna play it, and I'm actually gonna loop just a section of it and work with the loop for now. Since it's an electric guitar, I'm gonna add a gate first to get rid of the hiss in between notes. My threshold is about half, so this is fine. The difference between gate and ducker, gate says below this threshold, shut the signal off altogether. Ducking says turn it down, so keep it there, but make it lower. Just like our compressor, the attack is how fast the gate kicks on, and the release is how long it stays on, and then the hold is kind of an in-between for after the attack kicks in, but before the release shuts off. How long do I keep that level where it is? Now look ahead, you can set this to 0 and it works in real time, but look ahead, if I lift this up, it's actually going to start reading notes before I hear them, and it'll turn itself on or off preemptively. And then key filter, basically, if I have a note that is harsher than another one, I can say only come on above or below a certain frequency. We're not going to worry about that for now. Or what the side chain does, it does something similar to the key filter. Basically, you can trigger the gate based on another track. So that's how side chaining works. But we're not going to do that now. We're just going to say shut off when there's no notes playing. So then after the gate, we add a compressor. I'm going to use a preset. My guitar is going into a Fender Bassman and then coming direct out to record, so there's some natural breakup there that the amp does. I want to keep that, but I just want to lift up the volume. So I'm actually going to use the crunch guitar because the breakup is what I want to keep, the compressor's done. Now I'm going to add some color. using tone stack, but I don't want to add distortion, and I already have a gate. Keep the expander, compressor, and I'm actually going to keep this amp simulator here, and then I'm going to keep this signal really dry on purpose. Another compressor after the amp, because it's basically an amp signal going into an amp. I want to keep tweaking it until I'm getting just yellow, no red. Now I hear a little bit of hiss while the guitar is playing. So now I'm going to throw an EQ on it, channel EQ, and I can actually see where my hiss is coming from here. So I don't need the low boost. I'm going to put a high cut filter on it. At about 10,000. And that's just to get rid of some of the hiss and the string noise. I want it hard. And then I'm going to come down here and see where my signal is sitting. A little bit of red. So let's throw a limiter on it. Just because it's so little red, I don't want to bring the whole thing down. I just want to bring down those loud parts. Now I come over here to the aux channel where that's going, and we're going to add some speaker emulation. Split it, keep everything flat, and then add 2 of the same speaker. So I have the Bassman, which is a Tweed 4x10. I'm going to add 2 of those. I'm going to split the signal between the 2, make sure they're both in stereo. First one is going to be just a regular mic right up close. Actually, let's do a compressor. And the second one is an SM57 pulled off and off to the side. For the first speaker, this is going to be my clean channel. I'm just going to add a spring reverb. Keep everything at 12 o'clock, but bring the mix down. And then for the second one, this is the one I want to sound pretty. So for this one, we are going to add a studio delay and a plate reverb. Delay before the reverb so that the reverb makes the delay sound bigger. If I flip them and do reverb before delay, then the delay just doubles up on the reverb. So it's all about what you want to hear. Now you'll notice that my output is super low. Make sure both of them are turned on, and then you can add a compressor, and we do what we did last time, and we tell it below a certain threshold, crank it. So the threshold I want it to work at is 0 because I'm below that, and I basically want to double the signal. So we'll do that by moving that down and then moving the gain up. So you see how it got louder now? And then that's done. Now since this is a speaker and a mic emulator, I also want to turn on my Chroma Glow, which is just a tube emulator. I want a lot of presence, but I don't want it to sound hollow. No low cut. All right, this looks good. Still checking my volume. Now I'm gonna use a multipressor, and remember that because I actually use them for a bunch of different reasons, but this one, I built a preset for guitar, and that's loud, so we're gonna bring that down. We're actually gonna turn off the auto gain. And now my secret weapon, because all of these effects are in stereo, I'm going to add a stereo spreader, and I'm going to put that before the multipressor and tell it to widen the middle. And what that does is it makes the guitar sound more immersive. And then because my guitar is all over the place note-wise, I'm actually also going to add an expander, and that just takes certain frequencies and makes them bigger. So my high notes that I want to pop will pop, my low notes that I want to be duller will be duller. And then we're getting a lot of red here, probably because my expander expanding, and then just like before, but this time an adaptive limiter. It's okay if I'm still getting a little bit of red because we haven't actually started moving the sliders yet. And then we freeze this. And the only thing left to do with this actually has nothing to do with it at all. Here's what we do now. We take a random one of our other tracks, and we select stereo output, bus, create new bus. This is going to go to aux 7. So now we take everything that is not the guitar and we send it there. All right, so the bus mixes we set up last time are already there. So what we do is instead of sending the bus to the stereo out, we send the bus mix to the submix, which is what aux 7 will become. Now I'm going to keep the bass where it is, but the bass amp, change that to go to bus mix, and then the drums, basically the same thing. Anything that says stereo out will go to bus 7. And then we are ready to freeze and listen back. So we set up a sub mix for one big reason. We want to be able to mix all of our parts, but ensure that our lead part sits on top of it at all times. And if we were to route them all to one mix and then master that, it essentially also masters the lead and messes up the frequency response. So by having a submix that gets mastered separately from the main mix, we can actually keep our main part on top of everything in the master output. So now that everything is routed, what that does is it makes it so we can take our lead part and mute it all together while we mix the background. So if I mute track 1 and also mute aux 7 and then play the song, now I can start actually building my mix. All right, so I think I want to pan the organ, because we have an organ and a synth pad. I want the synth pad to definitely be quieter than everything else, and I want the organ to provide some top end with a little bit of shimmer from the acoustic guitar. So I'm going to mute the drums, which this is when that bus mix comes in handy, because instead of muting all 30 tracks, I only have to mute the one. So let's start with the bass. I want the clean signal to just barely touch the 0, but then I want the bass amp to be the same volume. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a limiter on the bass amp and then actually turn the limiter up. Now let's start. I said I wanted my synth. I want it to sit underneath everything, so I'm going to bring that way down to like -18. I want it so you can just barely hear it. But then I actually want to spread it a little bit. So I'm going to unfreeze it, add the stereo spreader. I want to spread the top, and then I'm also going to add an exciter, which takes those high frequencies and amplifies them. And then I'll freeze it back again. And then I want my organ to sit on top of this, but not crazy loud. So maybe -6. You might not be able to tell, but the organ, the way it's recorded, it actually bounces back and forth between the left and the right ear. I have a spreader on it to kind of accentuate that. And then I want the keyboard to sit all the way to the left, but then in between those two. So I can just barely make it out. It's just there so that you can hear when the chords change. And now my acoustic guitar is going to give me a little bit of sparkle. I don't want that crazy loud. I want it to be about the same as the organ. So now since my piano is panned all the way to the left, I'm going to pan the guitar to the right. And since it's loud in that one ear, I can bring it down a little bit. And now you can basically just hear the fingers on the guitar strings. And now my organ is still a little aggressive, so I'm going to bring that down a hair. Now I still have this electric guitar that I'm not going to touch yet. I have an idea for that. And then my strings and my brass, what we're going to do is loop where they play. So now my strings are all bussed to channel 7 here. So if they weren't, I would have to do all of my effects on 8, 9, and 10. But since I bust them, the raw 8, 9, and 10 can go to 7, and then I can add 7's effects to those 3 once, which saves me processing power. Also, if I mute or unmute 7, it unmutes 8, 9, and 10 as well. So 7 is high. So by bringing down 7, you see 8, 9, and 10 stay where they are volume-wise, but 7 is what's going to the actual mix. So these can stay like they are, but I won't have to mess with them. But I am going to tweak the pan. I'm noticing that 8 is heavy on the left side, and then 10 is heavy on the right, and then 9 kind of bounces back and forth. And then we do the same thing with the brass. The brass in my rough cut was super loud, so this is definitely going to have to come down. Now you'll see there are significantly more brass instruments. So first thing we do is pan. I see that these tenor saxes are heavy on the left. Trumpets are heavy on the right. Trombones are in the middle. But there's a second trumpet part that I'm going to keep in the middle. But then the alto saxes, I'm going to pan all the way to the left. And then just to balance it out, I'm going to pan the baritone sax to the right too. And then I'm going to bring them all down with track 11. I'm going to match the strings volume so that it sounds blended. And then I'm going to check the individual channels for any clipping. Then I'm going to hide those. I'm going to check my brass and my strings, and what I'm going to do, we're just going to add a bus. And we're going to send the horns to the same bus. And then this bus we're going to send to our submix. We're going to only have this be reverb. So stereo spread to spread it way out. Exciter to make the high notes pop. An expander and then here is the important part. We're going to come down here to reverb, and I like the room simulator. You want to give it a little bit more dry, but not a lot, because remember, our dry signal is actually still coming out as well. And that's going to get rid of some of that abrupt stopping from the MIDI track. Now it just lets it ring out by itself. There are two kinds of automation. There's read automations and touch automation. Read automations, you basically draw the highway and the fader drives it. Or touch automations, you record your fader movements in the same way you would any MIDI instrument. Of the two, the touch automations are the fastest to do and the hardest to edit, but the read automations are the most tedious to do, but the easiest to edit. And this is true for both Logic Pro and GarageBand. So for our song, I know what sound I'm generally going for, so I can just plug those points in, and it would be faster than listening to the whole song and riding the fader the whole time and recording the movements. And generally that's what you'll do if you already know what you want your end product to sound like. But if you are just trying to find something that works and you want the freedom to experiment, touch is the way to go. Or if you've got just like a live recording where everything is kind of moving at an unscripted pace, then touch is the only way to do it, and you would basically want to MIDI your faders to some sort of MIDI controller and then touch record all of them at the same time, which is what they would do in a professional setting anyway. Point being, either way works in certain situations, and either way is possible on the iPad. Okay, we are in GarageBand, and I'm just going to tell you right now, this is not going to take nearly as long as Logic Pro because half the features aren't there. So we've opened up our track. First thing we notice, there is only two options as to what to look at. And on the left here, we have our track settings, which only seem to work for recording. Our output, this is our slider. This is our panner, a master mute, and a solo. We have our effects. As we add to this list here will change. And then we have just the overall reverb and delay. We can't change the order around like we did in Logic. Logic does this abridge to view right here as well. Actually, let me show you that real quick. These effects here in Logic, the Logic equivalent of that is this. So this is what Logic's summary for effects looks like. But you can see even this does a lot more. Like I can modify the bus mixes here, I can modify the outputs here. I can do a lot more even on the abridged side here than I can in GarageBand. As I said before, it's not going to take nearly as long in GarageBand to do what we did in Logic because half of the options are not there. First thing we're going to do is solo our lead part, which is still turned off from last time. So to unmute, it's the speaker. To solo, it's the headphones. To select the track in GarageBand, you click on the waveform, not the track header. So since this is a guitar, we are going to add a noise gate. And I'm going to put it around 20. And that gets rid of some of the tail. I'm going to add a compressor. Remember, our ratio is how much it compresses. So right now it's set to 2.5 to 1, which means for every 2.5 decibels we go above 0, it's going to remove 1. So it's about half. That's a lot. So I'm going to turn this down a little. Four is a good number for raw instruments. Attack is how fast it kicks in. There's no release here, and the gain is what it adds once that threshold is met. So just like before, these are the only effects that we really have. I don't see the amp builder that Logic had. I could add in all of my effects here, but I only have this many to work with. So we're going to cheat and use a plugin that will let me use unlimited effects. I already have a gate, so I don't need this. I'm going to keep the expander. I'm going to keep the tube pre. I'm going to get rid of this compressor here. And then the breakup is still stronger than I'd like. So I don't have my speakers here, so there's a way to cheat. I'm going to put the splitter back. So now after the first channel here, for my A, that's where we're going to put our spring reverb. And remember, just turn everything to about 12 o'clock so it's mixed. Now don't worry about the volume dropping. We're going to fix that in a second. And then for the B channel, that's where we're going to put our speaker. As I said before, I play through a Fender Bassman 4x10. I'm going direct out from that, so I'm not getting the speaker emulation, even though it has an XLR out to do that. I just turn that off because I want the ability to tweak it after recording. So I'm going to take that and move it to the B. Make sure the stereo's on. And then what I did in Logic was keep one mic on, one mic off. I'm going to put this in the middle. So about 50 centimeters. And then just off the cone. And then this will actually get both the delay and the reverb. And then to boost the volume of the whole thing, we turn the input up. We add a compressor to the end of the signal. I'm going to use a valve compressor because it works better. And then that's done. So when it's done, we just say done. So I have my sound. Now let's clean it up. I don't see an EQ option aside from that one, so we're going to add another one. Based on this, we can see right around 90, it's super hot. The goal is I want all of these peaks to be as linear as I can. And by linear, I mean if I follow a line, none of them go above it and they stay around each other. Good. So you see how all of it, except for this, it's pretty equal. We had the multi-compressor in Logic. We don't have that here. So what we can actually do is use one of our purchased ones. Which is what this does. So this is a multi-band compressor, and it's kind of like an equalizer and a compressor married. And what you do is you can compress individual frequencies. So as I select them here, I can modify them. And the analyzer is going to show me where I need to put them. Right now, it looks like the only real issue is this A. And then I can check my visual EQ again to make sure I didn't mess something up. All right, it still looks to be right about where I need it to be. All right, now that that's done, I cannot freeze it here. That is not an option. So Now we can come in and just start our actual mix. All right, so since there's no bus mixes here, I basically have to mix everything under that lead part we just did. So what we do, we find the loudest part of the song. All right, I set it to loop. So we find the loudest part of the song and we kind of just start making adjustment. And now I'm just balancing things out. My brass is super hot. No bus mixes says that I have to actually mix these by hand. I'm adding reverb to the brass so that it doesn't sound so abrupt for the rest of the song to sit on top of. I want my cellos to sit to the right, violins to sit to the left, and then my second violins are going to stay in the middle because that's what we did in Logic. All right, my bass sounds kind of punchy. All right, the drums are still tinny, and I'm going to get rid of the effect EQ. And when we can use a preset, we will. All right, we're scrolling. All right, that sounds really good. The bass is there, but not overpowering. The drums kind of sit underneath everything. I forgot, we are not set in GarageBand because GarageBand does automations, but not to the extent that Logic Pro does. We automated this electric guitar part. We'll do that here as well. So here's the cymbal, and then you basically just tell it where you want it to kick in. You drag from the right. All right, this is not intuitive at all. They do not make this easy. You basically have to do it backwards. So we can't get as crazy with the fades here in GarageBand as we did in Logic because I got stuff to do and this is going to take a while. But I remember more or less where they're supposed to go. Just keep dragging them. Just gonna keep dragging them. Basically, if I put a note at every silent part, that's when the slider can move without somebody hearing something I don't want heard. Automations in GarageBand are done. Now we listen back, and then there's just one more step to do in both GarageBand and Logic Pro that I will actually put them up side by side to show you how to do it. Okay, so we have one more last optional step. We don't have to do this at all, or we could do this with our faders, but I like to do it just because it lets me be more visual with what I'm doing. We can do a little bit of arranging as part of our mixing. And so I've written down the BPM for the song and where all of the parts are. And what we can do is actually cut chunks of things out that we don't even want to play there. And it'll actually give us a cleaner sounding end product. So let's start in Logic first. The introduction goes up to measure 8. So I can take my stylus and just start getting rid of stuff that I don't want to play before measure 8. I'm undecided as to if I want my organ to play. I know what I'm going to do. I want the organ to play just part of it. And I can see where the part changes. So I'm going to split it at 8 and then shrink it to just that part that's heavy on the Leslie. And then we're going to do an organ swell right there. And what we can do is actually curve these lines so that the swell itself isn't so awkward sounding. And so now, basically what I told it to do was swell right here and then pick up with just the set volume for the rest of the song. The dynamics are pretty well built in already because I did some swells while I was recording it, but I might put a few more in there. Dynamics are good because it keeps your song from just sounding cookie cutter. So all of these parts that I knew I wanted the organ to be predominant, and I can tell that based on the size of the waveform. I'm just going to give it a little bit of boost to really put it over the top, and then here at the end, we're just going to fade the whole thing out. So this is where your automating becomes useful, because you can take something that you would have normally had to re-record, and you can just make it do what you want it to do. All right, so now that that's done, I said everything before measure 8. I'm going to keep the drums, but I think maybe the bass will come in halfway. For Logic, if you freeze tracks and then you cut them, it unfreezes them, so you have to freeze them back afterward. Now the strings and the brass, I can do this preemptively because those don't come in till the end of the song anyway. The strings come in the way end, and the horns actually only come in for the last part of the vamp. That actually made that very easy. The strings kind of fade out, but the horns stop abruptly. Now, Logic has a tail, meaning even if the signal stops, the effects will keep going for a little bit. So I can cut this off abruptly without it messing with my sound too much. There's a way you can turn the tail off if you want it to stop super fast, but this looks okay. Now, so my intro is going to just be acoustic guitar and the synth pad with that one organ swell. Now my verse goes from measure 8 to 20, or 9 to 20. So I'm gonna highlight that so I know where I'm working. And so for my verse, the bass is gonna go the entire song, but maybe for the verse, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to say just continue with what we had going during the intro. So we're going to get rid of the piano and the electric guitar, but then the organ will come back in just to add some depth. And then the verse comes back at 29 to 40. So right about here, we're going to split it again. And then there, we're just going to add the electric guitar. So still no keys. And let's lose the synth altogether because we don't want it to sound muddy. And then the verse actually comes in a third time at 57 to 68. So right here. And then here, before we were doing acoustic guitar and the synth, we're going to flip it. So no acoustic guitar, electric keys, no synth, and we're only going to have the organ come in for these louder parts here. And what we'll do, just to make sure that's smooth, is automate that. All right, so in review of everything we talked about today, we went over mixing in both Logic Pro and in GarageBand. We went over arranging while mixing, or prior to mixing, or not arranging at all and just mixing. Arrangement can be done in any of our steps, but we just did it today because it made the most sense as far as the video was concerned. And then we went over how to modify the sound further than we did during our leveling while we were mixing. Having said all of this, I realized earlier today that these concepts are universal. Even if you are not producing a song, we use the same principles in our video production as well. the audio I'm recording right now, as soon as I finish recording it, I am going to normalize it, I'm going to level it, and then I'm going to mix it into the actual video audio. So these principles translate universally. The same would be true for a podcast. If you have more than one microphone, all of them will need to be normalized, leveled, and then mixed, because no one is going to sit perfectly still for the entirety of a recording, and no two people speak at the same volume, at the same frequency, so some sort of modification is going to be necessary. So with that, our next video will be on mastering, now that all of our mixing is done. And may your gear be light, your latency low, and your dogs quiet while you track vocal.